Welcome to Wednesday night prayer service Bible study. Decent day in Ohio in October, first part of October. We are going to turn our attention to the book of Esther. So it has been my goal since coming to Maranatha Baptist Church to, if the Lord would be willing, to preach through all the books of the Bible. I don't know where I'm at this point in time. I know we're more than halfway done, but Esther is one of those books that we have not gone through chapter by chapter, verse by verse, so I thought we would start that endeavor. Should not take that long, 10 weeks maybe or less. And it's interesting how closely related as far as context or content is concerned regarding the sovereignty of God, how Esther relates to Joseph, which we are doing on Sunday nights. So if you're not a sovereignty of God fan, you've been struggling for the past couple of months and is going to continue to go on. What we're going to take a look at tonight is how not to demonstrate power, and that should become apparent here in a few moments. So the book of Esther, looking forward to this study, and so let's turn to probably the key passage or the passage that is most recognized out of the book of Esther and kind of the linchpin of the whole book. Esther chapter 4 verse 14 will be there in about 4 studies from now. For if thou altogether, this is Mordecai talking to Esther, holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance, the Jews, arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Let's go to our Heavenly Father. Lord, we are so grateful for Jesus Christ, so grateful for the opportunity to study all of your word. And Lord, we pray that you would guide and direct us through the book of Esther. Lord, as you teach us about your sovereignty, how you are in control, how to do things, how not to do things. And so, Lord, we pray that this would be beneficial to one and all. And we ask all this in your Son's name. Amen. All right. So here we have this most recognizable verse out of Esther. And we used this in the message this past Sunday. You are here for a reason. You are here for a purpose. There's nothing in my estimation about life, any human life, that is random. Okay? Am I saying every minute of every second is detailed out? I don't think I'm necessarily saying that. But God definitely orchestrates lives. And as I thought more upon my own life and how did I get to this point, meaning this point in ministry, this particular town, this particular place, I definitely see God's hand in all of this. And so Mordecai sees God's hand in delivering the Jewish people, and he basically tells Esther, you either do this or God's going to raise up somebody else, but God is going to keep his promises. And that's where I'd like to start at, launch this study on the promises of God. The promises of God depend on the person of God. They do not depend on you. Because if the promises of God depended upon people, those promises wouldn't be too secure. Because people are not very faithful. In the book of Esther, there's a couple of things we need to know. Number one, based on the calendar when certain events are described as happening in the book of Esther, there are also things on the Jewish side of the calendar, festivals and feasts, that they should be doing, that they aren't doing. By that we know they are Jewish people by nationality, but are they truly with all their hearts following God by, as would be indicated as the calendar of events, Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles? Are they keeping those feasts? Are they sacrificing? The answer is no. And probably the first thing most commentaries are going to tell you when you open up the book of Esther, there's one conspicuous person you do not find mentioned in the book. And who might that be? God. You don't find God mentioned in the book of Esther. God is all over the book of Esther as far as his sovereignty, but you do not read his name in any of its pages, in any of its verses. But God is going to fulfill the promise. We mentioned this this past Sunday. What is the promise that God made to Abraham? The promise is this: he would make his name great. He did that. He would make him a people that were too numerous to count as far as like the sands of the sea and the stars in the sky. And he was going to give them a land. And that land, in chapter 13 of the book of Genesis, he was going to give that land for how long? Forever. That is their land. And even today, in 2023 in October, we see a terrorist group trying to take that land and annihilate that people from the face of the earth. This has been one of the upteen times some people group has tried to do that, and it will not succeed ultimately because God's made the promise. The promise is not depending on Israel or the Jewish people. The promise God made is dependent upon him. God is faithful, even when we're not faithful. That's an argument Paul brings up in the book of Romans. Are you going to judge God's faithfulness based upon the unfaithfulness of the Jews? And the answer is you shouldn't be doing that, because it may look as some of God's promises for the Jews have not come true. Well, if anything has not come to pass yet, it's not on God, it's on God's people. They're the problem, God is not. And that's the same thing with us. God is never the problem. God keeps his promises. God is faithful to his promises, and you can bank on that. And another point of interest, so the promises of God are definitely a part of this book because the Jewish people are going to be threatened again by annihilation, and God's going to see to it that that doesn't happen. A second theme that comes up is sovereignty. We've talked about it in the life of Joseph. We talked about it this past Sunday in the morning message. So we're going to just sit here for a second and look at some textbook definitions. This is from Charles Ryrie, one of my systematic theology books. You buy all those books for college and you ever wonder, am I ever going to use these books again? And apparently this book I used one more time. So I'm excited about that. It was well worth the $50, I'm sure, to use it one more time. So the word sovereignty means principal, chief, supreme. Okay? It speaks first of position. So when we talk about the sovereignty of God, we're talking about this. So there's going to be some different nuances to it. God is the chief being in the universe. That was Satan's problem, right? He wanted to exalt himself above who? Above God. You can't do that. It is to our great benefit that God would even associate with us, let alone thinking we should exalt ourselves above that. And that's exactly what is happening in American culture. Somebody was trying to tell me that their relative does not believe in God. They believe in a God, maybe not the God of the Bible, but they believe in a God. It's the God they believe in is themselves. They have exalted themselves up to the position where they decide what is right, what is wrong, what's moral, what's immoral, what should be done, what should not be done. That's God. That is a God. And so they have not recognized, and that's what chapter 2, Psalm 2 is in the whole book of Psalms. They rage themselves against God. God is the chief being in the universe. There is no other. There are no other gods. All right? So it talks of his being, then of his power. Well, if he's the chief being, then he also has to have the supreme power. Otherwise, life teaches us the guy or lady with the most power is usually doing what? Ruling. Okay? Normally you don't see the second in charge, second most powerful person ruling. It's usually the person with the most power. God is the supreme being. He is supreme in power. Ultimately, God is in complete control of all things, though, and this is an important part that I want to really settle down on for a second as well, though he may choose to let certain events happen according to natural laws that he has ordained. All right? For example, someone was talking about me, or talking to me, not about me, I'm sure they talk about me too, but talking to me about that your days are numbered. Well, what about the guy who jumps out in front of a car? Well, God is going to let the natural laws go from there. Or he's going to have to supernaturally intervene. If you jump in front of a 55 mile per hour speeding car, what is going to happen? You're going to get probably killed or annihilated. Okay? You go out to the Grand Canyon, and I'm bringing this up because good friends of ours from New Concord are out there. We were out there, and the thing that I would never bring my young children out there, ever, if we ever go out there as in a family, and our children bring their children, and they're 8, 9, and 10, I'm not going. And I'll tell you why. There is no rails hardly around any of that Grand Canyon. And kids were standing out there, kids who ought to know better, on the side of the canyon there, straight down 1,000 feet, nothing between them. I mean, if a good breeze came, off there we're going. And if that happens and you fall that 1,000 feet, what is going to happen to you? You're going to die. Okay? God sometimes allows the natural laws to progress, and we're going to see this played out in a scene in chapter 1. All right? Scene in chapter 1 is going to show this. So when we talk about the sovereignty of God, God is the supreme being with the supreme power in complete control. And that is the key. We've had human leaders with a lot of power who are out of control. And so having power is only beneficial if the person who has it is completely in control and is totally righteous and just. That's an individual who you want having control, and that's who God is. So here, how about some tension of the sovereignty of God? Some people, and I just, on the way to church tonight, somebody on a Q&A radio program, if God chooses people to be saved, then how come he is mad at the people who don't? Why does he condemn them? Okay, that gets into sovereignty, gets into some weeds. We're not going to go there. But the tension of the sovereignty of God. The sovereignty of God seems to contradict the freedom or actual responsibility of man. That's sometimes what we struggle with, how those two tensions can be in harmony. We're going to see how that can be played out here in a little while. But that's something that people have talked about for years and years and years. Books have been written about the sovereignty of God. And here go our heaters, our possessed heaters, going off. Makes a lot of racket. Anyhow, the sovereignty of God and the actual freedom and responsibility of man, we're going to see this happen in just a few moments here. So, before we get too much further into the book of Esther, I need to give you the backstory, the historical context. And I absolutely love the fact that you can open your history book and find the context for Esther. Esther and the Jewish people were captured by Babylon. Okay? Babylon was overtaken by the Medes and the Persians. Another force at this time were the Greeks, who were in Athens, which would have been west of where the Median Persian Empire was. The king, anybody know the king in the book of Esther of the Medes and the Persians? His name? Ahasuerus. His dad was Darius. Darius wanted to go conquer Greece, sometimes called the Athenians from Athens. So his dad hatched a plan, I'm sure with his captains and lieutenants and whatever else, his leaders of his army. They were going to hop into the sea, not hop in, take their boats, and go up to north of Athens, I think north or west, to a place called Marathon. And they were going to begin the conquering of Athens through Marathon. The Medes and the Persians extremely outnumbered the Greeks or the Athenians. But in Marathon, there was a certain landscape, and the Greeks sucked the Medes and the Persians, Darius' army, into a land trap. And basically, though the Greeks or the Athenians were outnumbered tremendously, they defeated the Medes and the Persians. And you know the story, though you may not recognize it. That's the time that the guy ran 26.2 miles from Marathon back to Athens to tell the emperor the Athenians had defeated the Medes and the Persians. And what happened as soon as he told them the message? He died. Okay, from running 26.2 miles. And that's where we get the term marathon from today. When Joshua and Daniel ran a marathon down at Mohican, it was 26.2 miles, the distance from Marathon to Athens, Greece. So Darius tucked his tail between his legs and went back to Shushan, the capital of the Medes and the Persians, obviously quite disgruntled. He then was going to go down, and his ego was extremely damaged. Here's big, tough Media Persia going into Greece, who was at that time a much smaller and weaker enemy, and the big, tough Medes and Persians got pounded. They got sucked into a trap, and they fell for it. When they came back defeated, you can imagine the talk of the land. It'd be the old David and Goliath story. The giant got defeated, and that bruised Darius's ego. So he then decided he was going to go try to go down into Egypt and pound them a little bit to build his ego up. That didn't work either. And so he's defeated. His son Ahasuerus takes over. And Ahasuerus is going to show, Ahasuerus has this plan. I am going to raise up a 1,000,000-man army. And I'm going to take my 1,000,000-man army and I'm going to march it straight over to Athens, and we are going to pound the living daylights out of them. But I have to do some recruiting because I don't have a 1,000,000-man army. I've got to show the people in my kingdoms I am a big, bad dude. And at the same time, do some recruiting. So the way I'm going to show you that I'm a big, bad dude is I'm going to throw a 180-day party. That's chapter 1 of the book of Esther. And I'm going to throw this big, bad party, and I'm going to show you just how tough I am. And then I'm going to show you the wealth I have. I'm going to show you the possessions I have. And everybody's just going to look at me and go, "Ooh, Ahasuerus, he's the dude. Look at all this. We should sign up for his army." So they do. He gets a 1,000,000-man army. He marches up to Athens, where the Greeks are. The Athenians, the Greeks, see that he's coming, realize they are probably going to get pounded. So what do? They empty the city. They get as many people out of the city as they can and get them into the sea. Their boats are smaller, sleeker, and can maneuver very quickly. The Media and Persians get up to Athens. They bust through everything, and they get into the town, and they realize nobody's there. They all got out. So they realize that they went to the sea, so they hop in their big, bulky ships. Well, come to find out, the little sleek ships of the Greeks can outmaneuver the big, bulky ships of the Median Persians, and the Greeks wipe them off the map again. They defeat them, not this time on the land, but in the sea. So Darius, or Ahasuerus, has to come back and look at, take your Bible out, Esther chapter 2, where it says, everybody see Esther chapter 2? It says, after these things, that's the things they're talking about. That's after Ahasuerus just went up and got whooped by the Greeks the second time. So you can imagine what his ego's feeling like there. Okay? But what we're going to focus on tonight is we're going to focus on chapter 1. So chapter 1, recount, his dad has been defeated by the Greeks. He came back, got defeated by the Egyptians. He's gone. Ahasuerus wants to raise up a 1,000,000-man army. He wants to show the Medo-Persian Empire he's a big bad dude, and he's decided, I'm going to do this by throwing a 180-day party. That's where we pick it up, Esther chapter 1. Okay, so everybody with me? Got the context? So, now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. Darius is gone. This is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia over 170 and 20 provinces. 107 and 20 provinces. So 127. So it's a big place, right? That in those days, when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, and the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him. He's going to show them, yeah, Dad got kicked over in Greece, but we're big, bad people. Okay? So how many dignitaries are there? Every dignitary you can think of is there. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty, many days, even 180 days. So 160 days or 80 days, he's showing them. What's he showing them? He made his riches, the honor, and the excellence of his majesty. He's trying to show them, hey, listen, we still are the big bad boys in this neighborhood. And I'm the big bad boy manager, king. I am the man. Just because we got beat, do not think I am not the man. Sounds like a man, right? Okay. And when these days were expired, so they did their 180-day feast, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan. So he got all the dignitaries. Now he's inviting everybody. We're going to show everybody this feast. The palace, both unto the great and to the small, because he needs 1,000,000 men to have this army. Great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. Where were white, green, blue hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rings, pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black and marble. I mean, he's showing them the stuff. And they gave them drink in vessels of, okay, no Dixie cups, right? No styrofoam. You're going there, you're drinking, and not out of a water fountain. You're getting a gold goblet and you're drinking out of that. The vessels being diverse one from another, so they didn't come out of Walmart, one size fits all. Royal wine, not that stuff from the local get and go store. This is the stuff, the royal wine in abundance according to the state of the king. Can you see what's going on here? So nothing better than to show off your riches and have a bunch of drunk people there who are out of their senses. That's really good atmosphere to do a little recruiting. You see what I gave you here, son? He's half snockered up. I can give you that and a whole lot more in my army. And the guy's probably saying, where do I sign up? So Ahasuerus is taking pride in his personal possessions. And he's showing them off. So is God just allowing the natural laws to work here, or is he doing something supernatural? What do you think? If you're not sure, you can hold your judgment to the next part. Because this one, I'm definitely persuaded he's just not letting natural law. All right. I love verse 8 because verse 8 describes America and much of the world today, and I'll explain here in a moment. And let's look at verse 8. And the drinking was according to the law, none did compel, for so the king had appointed to all the officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Now, without seeing that bottom definition, do you know what this is saying? If you were a little confused like me, let me interpret that. No one was responsible for their behavior as a result of the amount of wine they drank. How convenient. See what that says? No one's responsible for their behavior based upon the amount of alcohol you drink. So if you drank too much, how much trouble could you get into that time? Nothing. No trouble. That was the new, he cleared way so that if you got drunk and acted like an idiot, it's like it never happened. You're not responsible for your behavior, okay? And that sounds a lot like in America nowadays. Does it seem like anybody takes responsibility for the things they do? No. It's always, I have a syndrome. I have a this. I have a that. I have another thing. It's my parents. It's my this. No one takes responsibility for their actions. And that's exactly what's going on. How really convenient. You can act like an idiot, stupid, and do the most profane things. And are you going to be in trouble? The answer is no. Turning a bunch of men over to their lewdness with absolutely no consequence. Seems like a good time to go recruiting some people, doesn't it? All right. So, now, is God just going to let natural laws pervade, or is he going to supernaturally intervene? And unfortunately, I can testify to some activities of people who have had to drink too much. What you're about to see is not necessarily God intervening. It is letting drunk, lewd men do what drunk, lewd men do. And what do drunk, lewd men do? They eat and they like to look at ladies, as a rule. So verse 9, what happens? A bunch of drunk, lewd men gathered together. And remember, King Ahasuerus is showing people he's the big bad dude in town. And one of the ways I'm going to show you, I'm going to get my wife. And I'm going to parade her in front of you so you can see just how extremely important I am. And I know every woman's dream is to be paraded in front of a bunch of drunk, lewd men, right? So when we're looking at this, this whole scene is very upsetting to anybody with morality, the Spirit of God within them. But let's remember what the book of Esther is about. The book of Esther is about saving the Jewish people. Somehow God has to get a Jew in a position of authority so that they can enact some legislation to help save the Jewish people. Correct? That's the goal. God's just showing us how he's setting it up. Same way with Joseph. What did God need in Egypt to help preserve the Jewish people at that time? God needed someone in control to help regulate the famine and the feast. And he needed a Jewish person there because the Egyptians are going to have the food. And what did the Egyptians think of the Jewish people? The Egyptians hated the Jewish people. So I need to get somebody, again, in a position of authority to help secure the safety of the Jewish people down in Egypt. And I'm not going to have to worry about the Jewish people mingling with the Egyptian people like the Jewish people were mingling with the Canaanite people and getting into trouble, because the Egyptian people aren't going to have anything to do with the Jewish people. So I'm going to be able to bring them down there. They're not going to fall for their idolatry and for their paganism, because the Egyptians hate the Jews. But I'm going to bring them down there and use Egypt as an incubator to grow my people and bring them back out. But God needed somebody in a position of authority. Just like God needed somebody in Babylon, Media, Persia with some authority to help combat what Haman is going to do or try to do to the Jews. Everybody with me? Okay. Verse 9. Also Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house which belonged to King Ahasuerus on the 7th day, when the heart of the king was made merry with what? He's drunk. So his friends. He ordered, verse 11, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal to show the people and the princess her beauty, for she was fair to look upon. And as I mentioned, that's not every woman's dream, to be paraded in front of 100 or more, maybe 1,000 or more drunk, lewd men. Oh, honey, when I think of the perfect date, I think of you taking me to the bar and getting your friends all drunk and parading me in front of them. Said no woman at any time in her life. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Thank God, at least Vashti had that much to her. Because we can't relate to this in our society because there's supposedly nobody with that much power. But technically what could happen is she could lose more than her marriage for not doing this. But again, so is God using his sovereignty at that particular time, or is he just allowing the natural law of drunk men to take place? I'd say he's allowing the natural law of drunk men to take place. So, what do you think a bunch of drunk men think of a woman not listening to them? Right? His ego's already punctured by his dad losing the battle. Now if word gets out, hey, listen, Ahasuerus' wife doesn't even listen to him, and he wants to raise a 1,000,000-man army? So they have to do what? They have to nip that right now. Then the king said to the wise men which knew the times, for so was the manner toward all that knew law and judgment. And next unto him was these leaders, these 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face and which sat the first in the kingdom. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law? because she hath not performed the commandment of King Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. They can't let that stand. They have to save face. And Memucan answered before the king and princes, Vishti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king of King Ahasuerus. Is that true? No. All the people? Are you serious? No, that's an extreme exaggeration. Doing so that he can come up with an extreme rule. Right? Exaggerate the consequences so that we can exaggerate the response. We had this in America. We exaggerated responses so we could exaggerate consequences. Nothing truly changes. For this deed of the queen's, verse 17, shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husband. Listen, the only way all the women are going to despise their husbands, the only way it's going to happen is if your husbands have acted as stupid as these men. I have to believe that within 120 some provinces, there have to be some men who had their head screwed on right. And their wives aren't going to treat them this way. And this, when someone hears the word, wives, submit unto your husband, this is the scene they have running through their heads. Why do that? Your husband, he can act like an idiot and you have to listen to him. That's not what the Bible teaches. I'm to dwell with my wife according to knowledge, not according to idiocy and drunkenness. I'm to dwell with her according to knowledge, knowing that she, number one, is a weaker vessel. There are many ways in which, and we're finding this out today, right, in our transgender world. Who would have thunk it? A man in many ways is more powerful than the lady. Shocking. Unbelievable. That's why they're wiping the girls off the map in athletic competition. They can't compete with elite men, but they can wipe the girls off the floor. Well, duh. The Bible tells us that's going to happen. And I don't exercise that to my advantage. I dwell with my wife according to knowledge, knowing there are times in our relationship I have to be the pillar. I have to be the strong one. Not I have to be the one beating her to show my supremacy, but when it's time, she's going to count on me being the one strong. I have to dwell according to that knowledge. But all the men in the province are going to act the way King Vishti act is erroneous. The only way the ladies are going to do that if all their husbands act like knuckleheads like King Ahasuerus did. Then you can expect that. A lot of loose translations tonight from the Todd Grover version. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia, verse 18, Media say this day unto all the king's princes which have heard of the deed of the queen. Thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. Not if you've been honorable. But again, remember, God's got to get her out of there. Because he has to get somebody in position to exercise some authority when the Jews are threatened to be annihilated. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it not be altered. And once the law was written in the Persians and the Medes, there was no vetoing it. You couldn't go back and erase it. You couldn't go, oops, or have my fingers crossed, my hands crossed. Once you signed that law, it was done. There was no stopping it, period. No one could stop it. So they got this thing written, which here sounds bad, but it's going to come up again against Israel, but then it's going to come up again for Israel, but we need to know that it's happening here. that it not be altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and that the king give her royal state unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor both to great and small. You know, if you have to write a commandment to get honor, you probably really don't have it. And the saying pleased the king, well, it sure would. Number one, he's drunk. Number two, he's been embarrassed. Number three, he's been shamed by an army, and now or his father, and now he's being shamed by his wife. His alter ego, which this 180-day party was supposed to explode, isn't exploding anymore. And the saying pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people and their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. Then off to war he went. He's got his 1,000,000-man army. Walks into Greece or to Athens. They're not there. They're in the sea. He follows them into the sea. It's another trap. Come to find out, those little Greek boats are a lot more maneuverable than those big, bad Persian ones, and they destroyed the Persians. He comes back with his tail between his legs. That's where you find it in chapter 2. Now, when he comes home, who's going to stroke his ego? Who? No one, because where's his wife? She's gone. So let's just read it. After these things, look at verse 2, or chapter 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered who? Vashti. She in there. She isn't going to come to his chamber and say, oh, big bad King Ahasuerus, you're my man. Because she is what? She's gone. So I better get another one in here, right? That's where we pick it up in chapter 2. All right. So do we see God orchestrating things? Not only can he orchestrate your world, believers' worlds, he can orchestrate everybody's world. When he needs for something to happen, because he's supreme in being and he's supreme in power, he's in what kind of control? Complete control. You don't have to worry. When this world seems out of control, the right answer is we may be out of control, but God is not out of control. He has got everything under control. And what you can't see working somewhere else, God doing things that we're unaware of to bring this world to its ultimate conclusion, because he's made a promise. There is going to come a time when God is going to say, it is over, it is finished, it is done, and this world is going to pass away, and a new heaven and a new earth are coming. He's promised it. And it's going to happen. Is it dependent on any of us? None of God's promises are dependent upon us. God's promises are dependent upon him. And he will see it through. All right. So that's the backdrop to Esther. We're off to a good start, I hope. And we'll go through there. We'll be able to work our way through chapter 2 pretty quickly, because we won't have to give the history lesson. But it's very important to know what was going on historically speaking and put it in the context of Esther. And so these things tend to make more sense. All right, so for those of you joining us at home, thank you for being here. Look forward to seeing you Sunday morning. We'll be in the book of Ecclesiastes, how to avoid